Hey there, Joe again, and thank you for joining me for another composition lesson. Now, this week's image is a little bit different in that, as far as the edit goes, it really didn't need a whole lot. It needed some important changes and some dramatic changes, but they were very simply done, and everything was done right in Lightroom. What was really interesting about this was deciding about the crop. And people don't give a lot of weight to the crop sometimes when they're thinking about the final composition of the image. In this case, the crop became very critical. Also, there are lots of crops for this particular image that would work. It all depends on mood, on what you like, and where it's going to hang. So join me in this. We're going to go into Lightroom, we're going to do the edit, and then we're going to discuss the hows and the whys of the crops and how they affect how the viewer receives the image. This discussion about composition is going to take a very simple image. The edit is going to be very basic, but most of it's going to be a discussion about, well, what are we going to do with the image? How are we going to shape it after we're done? So this is a bird I came across in Florida. The image is very dull to begin with. I don't think I have a custom profile. I do have a profile for it. So let's start. This was in Florida, and that helps a little bit. Let's open up the shadows. Let's bring down the highlights a bit. Let's add a bunch of vibrance and a bunch of saturation because I want to get the blue of the water to what I remember it as. Now, when I do this, however, it's affecting the entire image, and it's making the face of the bird go a little bit too blue as well. So let's zoom in at 50% a little, and let's get a brush. Let's turn on Auto Mask, and let's see if we can select the top of the bird. Let's hit O so we can see what we're selecting. Yeah, that's doing a pretty good job. And actually, as we're doing this, let's get the back of the bird as well. We don't have to go right to the edge. And anywhere where there's some color, a little of the back of the legs here, not maybe in the reflection. That's probably not necessary, but we'll be precise. All right. So what I'm after, I'm going to hit O to toggle off the mask overlay. So again, O, you see, is the same thing as hitting this little checkbox, show selected mask overlay. So I want to further open this up a little bit. I'm going to bring the exposure up a little bit. I'm going to make the saturation a lot more because I want to bring up the color of the bill. In fact, we may do that twice. Also, I want to separate the bird out from the background a little bit. So I'm going to pull some of the blue out of it. I don't want it to be quite so blue. Let's add a little more yellow, maybe a little more, add a little bit of magenta. Let's see, a little more yellow. Yeah, I think about like that. It's kind of showing the sun up a little bit more. Let's hit new. I want to get just the bill, so let me hit O so we can just get the yellow parts of the bill. We'll make that a little bit more yellow because it is, and we'll brighten it up a little bit. Okay, hit done. And let's space bar out. Well, that's looking a lot better already as far as the bird's concerned because if we hit the backslash key, look, there's where we started, there's where we are. What a huge difference. Yes, we are done with the edit. We could do some little bit of sharpening, that kind of thing. Not important right now. Now what's important is the discussion of the crop. What kind of feeling do you want to say about this? Now, if I left it as is, it's an option. The bird's going to be pretty small in the image. Now, if you made this a big print, you could do that. And if that was the case, then the blue would become possibly even a little more important. So I would probably come up to the Use Saturation Luminance slider, click on Hue. Let's see if we want to change the color of the blue a little bit. Maybe make it a little bluer. Maybe push it to the right just a little. And maybe make it a little more saturated. You can go crazy. That would look unrealistic. Maybe add a little saturation to it. You could darken it or lighten it. Not too much, though. Yeah, actually, I think that was fine the way it was. Actually, maybe we will bring it down a little bit. Let's bring this luminance down just a little bit to make the bird stand out in the background. So let's hit done. And again, we started there, and that's where we are now. Very simple kind of edit. All right, so now let's make some copies. I'm going to hit Command apostrophe or Control or right click apostrophe I'm going to create 4 virtual copies of what we just did. And let's go back to our first copy. Let's bring up the cropping tool. Now, in my cropping tool, when I'm dealing with pretty much everything, landscape or wildlife, I prefer what's called the golden ratio rather than the rule of thirds. And if you come up to Tools and go to Crop Guide Overlay, the default is thirds. And I find the thirds to be a little bit too static. There's no movement to it. The golden ratio, I find, works a lot better, creates a little more movement. So you can see from there, the bird's right on the golden ratio. Is there too much? Well, maybe. So let's bring the bottom up. And since the bird is kind of mirrored in the background, I want to allow the same amount below the reflection pretty much as there is above the top of the bird. So we could go for this panoramic feel. And does that work? If we go to full screen, yeah, it kind of does. It sets a certain kind of mood. It's about the environment and the bird. And I love the one little drop of water on the end of the bill. Let's try something else. What else could we do? Well, maybe you don't want to do a panoramic. This thing needs to fit into a standard frame. So we'll come up to the crop tool, and where it says original, well, let's say you want it to be an 8x10 or a 16x20 or something like that. So we can just choose 8x10. And there's an 8x10 crop. We could then bring it in. And where do you want the bird to be? Do you want it to be dead center like this? Let's take a look and see what happens if we do that. Now, there's a problem with this. If we do this, there's no motion, there's no direction in this particular crop. Here's a bird, it's in the middle, that's it, let's leave. We could come in a little bit closer. Let's make the bird as big as it can be and still fit in the frame if we put it in the middle. We're going for that symmetry. But again, it does not work because there's no motion to it. The bird's looking off to the side, so shouldn't we put the bird on the opposite side so it creates a sense of, well, what is the bird looking at? So let's click over to there. And there we go. There's the bird off to the left. Do I like it? Not particularly, because I don't think an 8x10 as a frame has that much motion to begin with. So let's move on. Let's try another one. Let's go the other direction. Let's unlock our original here, and let's try a vertical. In fact, let's try a vertical, and let's go 11x17 vertically. Oh, I got horizontal, so you keep dragging it until it turns into a vertical, and then move the crop over to the bird. And let's bring it in a little bit. Let's put the bird on the left line and hit enter on that. Does that work? Yeah, that might work. In fact, I think I might want to come in a little bit closer. Maybe something like that. Yeah, that does work. That is certainly an option. In fact, could we take this in a slightly different direction? Let's take one more look. Let's get the crop tool. We'll start out with our 11x17, and let's drag it until it goes vertical. You could also do something interesting and have the bird really off into one corner, more like this. And that kind of creates an interesting thing as well. Now you might decide you want to add a little more interest to this, so I will get a graduated filter. Let's bring one up from the bottom. We'll make this a little darker. Ooh, that's looking kind of interesting. That might be a winner there. So let's hit done. And look what that did. Now by putting that gradation, it creates a motion up from the bottom, because when you create a crop like this, you are now forcing the person to look at it up and down when you put it in a crop like this. Kind of interesting, and actually it does kind of work. I might take a little off the top maybe and do it this just right there. And let's go full screen. And I have to say that adding that little gradation of darkness on the bottom does create a little more motion in the image. In fact, I'm curious to see what it looks like on the panoramic. So let's go back to our panoramic crop. and do the same thing. Let's add a gradation here. And we'll come up to where the bird is in the water. Let's darken this up a little bit and see if it does the same thing. It helps. Interestingly enough, it's not quite as powerful as with our vertical. Why is that? The reason is because on a panoramic frame like this, in fact, I'm even going to make it a little more panoramic, and I'm going to take a little bit more off the left. And you might think this is extreme, but this becomes very designy looking. Okay, so there's the image with the bird off to the left and our slight darkening on the bottom. Why is it not as powerful? It's because of the crop. When you look at an image that is cropped this way, that has this panoramic feel, you are forcing the viewer to look at the image horizontally. Their eye will come in from the left and track. There's nothing over here, and you have the white bird, so it will draw them right back. If you wanted the color maybe a little more saturated, you were going for a decorative piece. You wanted this blue to match something in the interior of your home. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But understand that when you crop an image like this, that you're making them look at the image from left to right as a default. Conversely, if you create something like this where you've got a vertical, what's going on is you're making them look at it up and down, and that adds impact to that gradation that we've put in here. And you could crop this however you like. And one of the interesting things about having an image like this is that there are many places in our homes where we have these tall vertical places, and we have a tendency to cram in 8x10 horizontal images in there. Here's something that shows you that you could go the other way. In fact, I'm going to create a virtual copy of this, bring up the crop tool, and I'm just going to do a custom. I'm going to hit on the arrow. It doesn't need to be an 11x17. Maybe I want it to be, something like this. I'll get the bird off to the left a little bit. And I'm putting him up into the upper left corner for a reason. And when you've got something like that, where you've got this space, it can get kind of interesting. And if you frame something like this, it's going to fit in some of those really tall, thin places in your house. So that's the discussion. The discussion, yes, the edit was important, and adding that little bit of gradient did take us a long way. In fact, I'm going to go back to the original. I'm going to make a copy of that and reset it. And let's go through our options. All right, so let's take a look at all of the variations that we've got here. Here's the original raw file before we did any color adjustments. And then here's the same image in Lightroom after we made our color adjustments. Looks a lot better. By itself, kind of interesting. It's very decorative, and if this was a bigger print, could be interesting with all of that plain blue water surrounding it, so still. So here is the panoramic treatment. Has a lot of motion to it. I'm not sure if I like the gradient on the bottom. Let's remove it and see. There's without the gradient. Technically, I guess actually they both work. Creates a little more dimension by having the gradient, but this is kind of maybe a little more zen. I like them both. They're both viable. Going to something more square like an 8x10, personally, I don't think it works. There's not enough motion in the image. Going to more of a vertical, here's an 11x4, 11x17 vertical. Nice thing about this is it's a standard frame size, so you can go to Michael's and put this in a frame. Yes, it works. I think my favorite, however, strangely enough, might be this one or the next one. With the gradient, the vertical forces you to look at the image up and down, and the gradient now adds a little bit more motion to the gradation of the background, plus with the bird looking off in one direction. And then we take it one step further with sort of a vertical panoramic. And, I think framed, this might be my favorite. Framing this and having a tall, thin image would allow you to fit it in a place in your home or office that has that thin kind of wall without having to cram a little 8x10 in there. So that's it. That was the discussion about composition, and I just wanted to show you how important the shape of the final crop does, because it's really going to affect how you look at the image. Try experimenting with cropping. Try those gradients to make the foreground, the bottom part of your image, a little bit darker, because it does form a little bit better base for the rest of your image. So as we did our color edit, you see that cooler colors like blues and greens recede, go off into the distance. If you warm something up, it advances towards you, and that creates some dimension in the image. Now, after we got that under control, you got to see the effects of different crops. How you crop it is going to determine how someone looks at the image. If it's a long panoramic, they're going to look across it. If you shoot it vertically, they're going to look from the bottom up generally to follow the image. And that motion of the eyes is going to have an effect on the image as well. So, hope you enjoyed that. Hope you had some fun. Hope it made you think about how important cropping can really be. So that's it for this week. Hope you liked it, and I'll see you online again soon. Bye-bye.